Good afternoon. Thanks for joining. This is Kibble Equipment's virtual planter clinic part 1. It is Thursday, March 11th at 1 o'clock. This is being streamed on Facebook Live, and so if you got any questions, please chime in. For today's session, we are going to be focusing on preseason in the yard setup, which we call a ready to run. So if you haven't thought about getting the planter out of the shed and hooked up yet, please do so. It seems like every spring something goes wrong and we hear it worked last year. It's pretty common. There's a phenomenon called shed disease that we're going to try to fix here with today's clinic. To follow up with this clinic on March 25th at 1 p.m., we'll be reviewing items to consider when you actually hit the field. So today is what to do when you get hooked up, and then in 2 weeks we're going to cover what you actually do when you hit the field. So to start, I have a co-host here today. Margot, can we do a quick sound check?
Hi, good afternoon.
Hey, Margot's joining us from Tyler, Minnesota, and I'm sitting in Owatonna, Minnesota. So it is truly 2021. So what Margot is gonna cover to start is some items in our ready to run guides, and you can find these on our website kibbleq.com. Go to kibbleq.com and then just click on service. And then on the left-hand side, we have a link for our planter guides. We also have some combine guides, but these are our planter guides. We have 3 different versions based on your planter monitor and generation of planter. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Margot.
Okay, are you seeing my screen? I need to verify that first.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay.
We do need to go to full screen view, though, I believe.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Okay, so done many planter clinics in my life, but first time this way. So bear with me, but looking forward to having a little fun and talking about what it takes kind of get ourselves into the planting mindset in the yard and all the things that we can do in and around the machine prior to going to the field as we get ready for this planting season. So we're going to start kind of in the beginning here with hydraulic hookups. So first things first, you got to look at that mess of hydraulic hoses kind of laying there on the hitch of the planter, get your tractor there and try to remember what we did last year, right? So in our guides, this is straight from a SeedStar 4 guide. So we're assuming ExactEmerge and IRHD with this picture here. So each configuration, different planters have different options on them. So it's going to be slightly different. And I kind of walk through what we see here. So with an ExactEmerge electric drive planter, we usually have PTO, power generation. So there's no hydraulic needs for the actual drive, for the calibrate or the seating portion. But we do have vacuum motors, CCS fans that we need to make sure are hooked up as far as that goes, raise lower markers. So in this picture, if you follow my hand here, there is a case drain port, and what we have a case drain line coming off of both of our vacuum motors and our CCS fan motors. We'd like you to plug that one in first. That's kind of what we're noting down here in the notes. This is a smooth flush face type connector, and it can only go in one spot. So we get that one hooked up first, and then we'd like to see you hook up your raise and lower circuit, of course, to number 1. And that also runs your CCS fan. So when we put those down into continuous detent, then your fans run for your CCS. And then if you had markers, we'd probably plumb that into number 2. This planter did not have markers, another testament to it. It truly is 2021. So we went right ahead and started plumbing in our vacuums. So depending on how many outlets you have available and how many vacuums on your planter, if you can, we'd like to plumb each of those vacuums individually into each individual SCV. Therefore, when you have them individually plumbed, we can, on these newer planters, use a feature called vacuum automation. And essentially with vacuum automation, instead of messing with your dial in the cab to adjust your hydraulic flow, you basically say, hey, I want this many inches of water for vacuum, and it will adjust it for you on the fly. So that's what you're looking at here. If you had a VRD motor, like on a SeedStar 2 planner, you could either plumb that to an SCV or to your Power Beyond circuit. So we'll take a look at this picture in our Power Beyond circuit down here below. We've got 2 extra plugs added here, or couplers added here, and we are pressuring our IRHD and returning it through our Power Beyond circuit. Probably the other thing to note is when we plumb our vacuums, we kind of like to do those kind of opposite. So instead of putting pressure into the extend side, we're going to put our pressure for our vacuums into the retract side of the SCV. That way, when you get in the cab and you think about our little paddle switches for hydraulic control, we will be able to push those into a continuous detent position, and then on the forward side, and then when we turn them off, we push them on forward into the float position. And that just allows us not to deadhead stop motors and let them kind of just ramp down, slow down on their own. So that would be our recommendations there. And of course, in all these situations here, we're going to be using continuous flow when you're setting those up under the hydraulic screen in your tractor. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to the next screen here and talk about measurements. So we are going to dive pretty deep into the monitors today, and we'll show you where you actually enter these numbers. But we thought we'd just kind of walk around the machine virtually here on some of the key measurements we need to make to get our system dialed in, specifically for section control to work, specifically for the mapping to be accurate, auto track as well. So we'll start with lateral or machine offsets. So, and these all are kind of related to where the receiver is positioned on the tractor. So our GPS receiver gets mounted on our cab roof. Whether you have an original or deluxe shroud, typically sits in the front and in the center. So lateral offsets typically are 0 because we install them in the middle of the cab. If you have any other configuration than that, you need to put a measurement in here if it is slightly offset. The second measurement we look at is the position of the receiver to the non-steering axle. So with the non-steering axle on a row crop tractor, that's your rear axle. If you're looking at a 4-wheel drive tractor, that would be your front axle. So that's what we're illustrating in these pictures here. You need to get an accurate measurement in inches there. And then lastly, we look at GPS height. This helps with some auto track functions down the road. So get that measurement from basically, I always measure from where the green and the yellow meet on the receiver to the ground. So take a note if you got this book at home or you stop by one of our kibble locations, write those down in here so you got them handy, and then we'll get them punched into the cab later when we are in our monitors. Next, in a Gen 4, there's another box where we talk about connection offsets. There are also measurements on the tractor. So we're kind of picking up where we left off at the rear axle, right? So we had the receiver to the rear axle, and now we're looking at the rear axle to the connection point. Of course, there's different ways we mount our planters. We could either connect straight to the drawbar. We might be measuring to a 2-point connection or a 3-point connection for a mounted planter, or we might be looking at a 1770 planter that has that pivot point as well. And then lastly, on a 4-wheel drive, remember that we're not starting from the back axle. We're starting from that front axle, the non-steering axle, all the way back to that connection point. So that's going to be a big one on a 4-wheel drive. But get those measurements jotted down when you're out looking at your machine so we can get those in the cab. So next, we need to look at the planter. So once again, I've got the planter unfolded in the yard, and I would lower the planter down. First question is, do we have any lateral offsets? Is your planter tracking, or is it potentially offset? The only really scenario we have on that might be with a split row type planter. So most planters track straight down the middle. That would be a 0. And then the next measurement that we look at is what we're looking at with this picture here. If you follow my hand, is the center of rotation. So this measurement is from where we connected, okay, our drawbar, or this, we're going to use a 1775 in this example, our 2-point, all the way back to our frame carrying wheels, our frame wheels on the planter. And I would want to make this measurement with the planter lower down in working position. And while you're down in working position there, making measurements, you're going to make another measurement called the work point. And that will go, once again, from the connection point all the way to your seed tube where, where the seed is being dropped or released. So this one's super critical for section control, for accuracy and getting us set up there. So make note of that, going straight to your seed tube where the seed is dropped. If this picture's a split row, if you do run like a 1790, in corn, you're going to just go to your front rank, but when you're planting beans, you might want to adjust that measurement with both ranks down and shoot for a number in between. So just a little tip there for those guys running those planters. All right, well, with that, I'm going to exit out of this kibble getting ready guide, and bear with me, and I'm going to switch over to my monitor simulation that I got set up.
And just one quick comment, Margot. I mean, these measurements are probably the most common it worked last year scenario where things were working good for section control, and then you plant all your crop, and now you have these perfectly rectangular shaped empty spots in the edge of the field where section control wasn't working right. Something got changed. So probably the most common it worked last year. So very important.
Yeah, so that's why we like to keep paper notes just in case and tuck them in.
Wait a minute, I thought you said it's 2021.
I know it is 2021, but I like a backup system. So, okay, well, let's get started here looking at our monitor. So we were just talking about measurements. So where do you enter those in that? Where do I start with this Gen 4 monitor? So we're looking at a default guidance screen here. I'm going to navigate down to our shortcut bar. So you can customize this bar and put in here little hotkeys or buttons to shortcut into different apps inside the monitor. One that I would never want to remove is this one, the setup button. We'll use this all the time. Pretty much every time you switch fields, you're going to have to come back here to reconfigure your screen. So kind of start at the beginning here up in the corner on the left and look at our location. So this is the good old client, farm, and field spot where we would go in the 2630 monitors, right? Oh, I might be having a, there we go. So client, farm, field. So we're working in a simulator today. We're just going to go ahead and select the deer client. The deer or the simulator is the farm, and we're going to work on the South 40 today. So they have 4 fields entered underneath that client and farm. So just remember, our setup data needs to be created probably in the Operations Center, or should be created in the Operations Center, and downloaded to a USB with the data manager, and then uploaded into our monitors via the file manager. We'll work on getting a video out on that whole process. We've talked about it in some of our live updates, but we're not going to go into detail on how that's done today. But I'm going to go ahead and grab my South 40 field and go ahead and say, okay. So this is where we're going to go farm first. And oh, a little tip too, like if you're playing around in the yard, punch in a client, farm, and field called test, or yard. So if you're playing around and raising and lowering the planter and you're making some, coverage on the screen, it won't mess up your field for the year, with that little extra bit of coverage or data. Then next, let's go to the equipment section here, and we are going to take a look at these equipment profiles. So this is where the measurements come back. So under the tractor here, we're going to go ahead and edit this profile. If you are moving your 4640 and you had it in your combine before and there is no tractor to modify, this is where we're going to have to create a new profile. I will tell you that the late model R series typically automatically generate a profile, but the earlier models do not. So you'll have to create a new one, or same thing goes for if you're running a non-deer tractor in front of your planter as well. So we'll go ahead and hit this tractor, edit, and take a look at this information here. So we are in a row crop tractor.
Hey, Margot, we did have a question come in about the difference between track tractors and wheel tractors for as far as the measurement. I don't know if you can demonstrate that on the simulator.
Yeah, I don't have we could actually, let's swap this out and tell it it's a track tractor. Perfect timing. And then when we go in here under a track tractor, same types of measurements, but we'll kind of show you as we go into the GPS offset screen here, Gotta love software, right? They tailor it to what you're running. So the pictures will change a little bit, and it will show you how to make your measurements for a track tractor. So once again, receiver is more than likely in the middle with 0, but this is that inline offset. So with a track tractor, they talk about a center of rotation. So track tractors typically pivot in the middle, right? They got a big drive wheel, front idler, and those mid rollers, and they don't turn in the back or the front, they turn in the middle. So that's typically where you're going to make your measurement. And if you're not sure what that is, I always, like, if you're out in the yard, I just kind of turn my wheel left, right, and make a little mark, and that's where you're going to measure to. So we'll say okay there, and then we'll go ahead and that GPS height we talked about, you would enter into this box as well. And then we'll scroll on down. Remember, we talked about connection offset. So if we're dealing with our drawbar connection or our 3-point connection, this is where we would go ahead and choose that. And make sure you use rear 3-point, not front. That'll really screw things up. And get that measurement in from that center of rotation, once again, on this track tractor to that 3-point hitch. Say okay. It's really important as we're working through these pop-ups that we make our adjustments, and then always okay to save our adjustments. Sometimes we have options to just X out of certain things, and if you do that, your settings may not be saved. So that wraps up the machine profile. I'm going to hit save down here so all that information sticks, and then say okay. Still selected. But now I've got that track tractor in there, and then we're going to move to our implement profile and our planter. So we'll talk about this screen pretty quick here. So John Deere SeedStar planters will automatically push a profile into the equipment section here. It's pulling straight from that SeedStar controller, and that is true for SeedStar 2s as long as they are a black wedge box. So about that model year 10 or newer. SeedStar 3 or SeedStar 4. They'll all populate through here. Now, if your planter is not a Deere planter, or it's a little bit prior to that, you may have to add an operation and create that implement profile for that planter. But in this case, because we are dealing with SeedStar planters, no extra operation really needs to be added. It knows it's a planter, and it knows it's going to be seeding. The only time you would add an operation, just to talk through this a little bit, would be if you have some other function on the planter, a secondary function on the planter that's happening that you would want to document. So maybe you have a ground drive fertilizer system. It's not high tech. We just drop it down. We set up a transmission and a drive wheel. You could add that as an operation just to document the liquid fertilizer, being applied. Now, if you have a rate controller, however, running your liquid fertilizer, that would automatically populate just like the SeedStar does, and you would set up the operation inside that. You wouldn't have to add anything extra. So this is something that, back to the list of things that we get phone calls on, this can get a little confusing here too.
Yep.
So
one other common area too, Margot, is people doing strip trials where they have maybe another product like a fungicide or insecticide, something they're added in their liquid fertilizer, some other voodoo mix where they can document that strip by adding that flat rate operation. Yep.
That way you get a map for it, right?
Yep.
At the end of the day, we're trying to get a map. So let's jump into this 1775 here. Okay, so we kind of start where we left off on the machine, right? So we have our connection type again. So this is a 1775. It will be a 3-point connection. You need to choose that and say okay. And then it will also ask us whether it's pivoting or non-pivoting. So 1770s do have a pivot pin in them, just about slightly behind that 2-point connection. A non-pivoting example would be like a true mounted planter. And then it's going to ask us to measure that pivot offset. So this is 9 inches, and this is a default thing. They're all about that distance. So say okay. But here's why we double check, because things get messed up. So year in, year out, unless you had them written down and you can verify it, I would always double check. I always get the question about, well, their default in there from Deere. Shouldn't Deere know what it is and shouldn't it be right? Yep, but somebody else has touched it and maybe multiple people have touched it since it was built. So that's just nature of our game. So anyway, as we move down the implement profile, working with is basically all coming from the planter. You know, it knows it's a 16 row 30 planter. Then dimensions. So these were the measurements we went too fast, too far. This is the first set of measurements we talked about, that lateral offset, which will more than likely be 0. And then once again, that center rotation. So this is that measurement from the connection point to your frame wheels when they're in the working position. For that one, we'll say okay. And then step down one more, we'll go to the work point box. So this is that section, that critical section control measurement. So once again, connection point to where the seed is dropped, that seed tube. We'll go in there. And then we have more configuration from the planter. So sensors, more likely you're not going to need to touch this unless we're replacing something or working on something, but our system has IRHD, individual row downforce. So there's a sensor on every row for downforce and ride quality. And looks like we have 3 vacuum motors in this situation as well. There's 3 sensors. Also, if you had fertilizer sensors, this is the air pressure sensors for, this one has the easy adjust closing wheels. This is how the simulator is set out. Next, mechanical delay. At this time, I'm going to have you glance at this box and kind of understand it, but I don't want a lot of changing here. The defaults on the mechanical delay will be probably 0.3 seconds and on and off. And this truly is like how long it takes our system to react when we command it to start or stop planting. Okay. In an electric drive, it's pretty snappy. Versus a hydraulic drive, which are also pretty snappy, but these are very quick to react. So when we tune section control in the field, we'll use a little, I call it a workflow or a wizard inside the section control app. And that's how we'll adjust it. We typically don't adjust our on-off times here. We use that, and that adjusts these for us. So good to know where they're at for reference purposes. And if you get in here and you see like really large numbers in here, that usually indicates that there's something not quite right with our measurements. It shouldn't need a lot of delays to react to get us tuned in. And then a couple more things to note on this implement profile. With section control, there's an option to group your outer rows. If you have less than accurate, you're not having the most accurate day for signal, maybe you're only using SF1. When we group the outer rows together and you don't have an individual section, so first of all, I recommend SF3 and RTK for planting, okay, or SF2, but I know what happens out there. But when we group our outer rows together, if you have something going on with a boundary or something going on with GPS back and forth with poor coverage or a drift situation, that outer row, it'll take both rows to get into that section, right, into that previous coverage before it kicks off. So that's why we recommend doing that. It's a kind of a precautionary thing. And then lastly, for those of us that are looking at potentially going to passive implement guidance this year, and they got a receiver on their planter, or looking at that auto path feature now, you will have to mount a receiver on your planter. And this is where we select that receiver as the implement receiver and also make measurements for that one. Tell the system where that one's at. So not in this configuration. I might just need to cancel that. Yeah, there we go. Don't want any error messages later. And we'll go ahead and hit save. And now we are done with the equipment profiles and we can say okay again. So we're still in work setup. We're not done yet, but I will jump right over and we'll talk about the rest of the section over here. So work summary. Remember when I said it knows we're planting and seeding? Can't change it. It knows it's a planter and we're seeding. This is where we choose our crop type. So this is going to be important that we get the right crop type in so we can choose the right planter setup later. So we're going to talk about corn today. So we have that selected. And then, of course, want to go find our varieties. I've already preloaded one in here. If you want to switch it out, you can always switch it out from those you've preloaded from your setup file, or add one on the fly if you need to, because they had a change in season right from the display. Okay, these are requirements to make it record. And then lastly, control or target rate. We have two options here, either our controller rate, so whatever rate our planters set at for just a flat rate, or we can go ahead and choose a prescription. So let's take a look at that. This button here will kind of hop us into the planter monitor side of things. So I'll hit that and target rates. So right now I just have one rate programmed into my planter. It's 36,000 seeds. So if I wanted a couple other options to just switch to on the fly for a flat rate, I can go ahead and click on one of these open boxes and type in 30,000. And then the key here is to make sure that we come down and uncheck the disable rate box. Once that's unchecked, we can say OK. And now that one is also available to select and use. So these others are grayed out because we have not assigned a rate to them and we've not disabled that. So, or unchecked that disable rate box. So you only see what is unchecked, I guess, which is handy if we want to keep a few different things in there. Next, we'll go ahead and leave it on 30,000 seeds, and yeah, we'll say OK here. Oops. Bear with me. I think I got ahead of myself. Okay, I'm going to X out of this box. And one more time. Okay, so that's how we get back to the work setup. So we told it we're going to use a flat rate, and we set up some rates in the planner side of things. If we want to use a prescription, we can go ahead and choose that RX function here. And this is going to, if you hit the empty box next to it, if you've already loaded, so you have to import your prescriptions via USB or wirelessly through the file manager, just like you do a setup file. So once those are imported, they should be available in a list to pick from. If you haven't imported them yet, this is a quick link to the file manager to do that. So we already have imported one. This is the South 40 field. So you're going to pick the one for the South 40 field that's relevant to what we're doing. So we're going to pick our seed corn or corn seeding prescription here, say OK. And that'll pull up, because all of our prescriptions are kind of a universal format. It'll pull them up, and we get to make some decisions here before we save it and apply it. A couple decisions you get to make are look ahead. So this is basically how quickly you want it to kind of ramp up and start changing the rate when it starts entering a zone. 0.3 seconds is a nice benchmark to start at. Multiplier is an option. So at 100%, the prescription is going to apply to the zones as it was written. If you want to bump everything up or everything down, you sure can by going to 110% or 90%, and all zones will be equally dropped by that amount. Inside the rate box, I like to take attention to this to make sure we have something in there for the loss of GPS or no GPS rate, and also the out of zone rate. I guess I shouldn't skip over either. Make sure your units are right. We're doing in seeds per acre. This is not a situation where we're doing anything by pounds, right? And then no GPS. So it defaults to maintain previous rate, which is fine, except if your previous zone was like 20,000 and we're going to lose, granted, we shouldn't lose GPS, but if we did, I usually like to put an average rate in here, like 30,000 might be an average for the farm. And then an out of zone rate, once again, when it gets out of a zone, maybe the prescription that was provided for you and what you're actually got worked up and planting this year, maybe the boundaries aren't quite true. Once again, if you wanted to still plant outside that zone, give it a nice average rate to work with as well. And when you're done setting all that, make sure we hit OK to save. And then save again. And now we have established the prescription as our target rate. So it should plant based off of our prescription. That was kind of a mouthful. We are done with the work setup section here. So I am going to hit OK and kind of move along for our checklist. Is there any questions regarding work setup, Chris?
No, not seeing any. And I know
Okay,
that was a lot, but this is exactly why you want to do this before you go to the field. You want to do this when you're in the yard, when it's weather like today.
absolutely. So now I'm going to navigate into the SeedStar app, and I did put a hotkey for the SeedStar app on my shortcut bar. So you can configure this shortcut bar, and we will have videos posted on our website on how to do those. But we'll not go into detail on that today. So you can obviously you can get to the SeedStar quite a few different ways. You can navigate through the menu. We have this hotkey. Also on our default pages, so there's 3 default run pages for planters. You can get into several things that way, but today when we're talking about preseason setup, I just like to go straight into the app. So we'll hit the SeedStar app here, and remember those rates we were setting up. So if you wanted to go ahead and continue to set up more rates, this is the one that's selected right now. That's why there's a box around it. But if I wanted to change that rate, oops. Actually, this is just a setup screen. You actually change your rates on the other screen, but this is the one that's currently selected. And then I guess where I don't want to deviate too much here. So where I need to get to is a setup section, right? So we told the system earlier we were planting corn. Now we need to come in and confirm that we have the right seed disc selected. So ExactEmerge planters, this A92777 is the 32 cell corn bowl that we use for those planters. So just got to come through this list and make sure that's the one we have selected. You can drop the menu down and they will, if you're for some reason planting something a little different or using something a little different, they might be in this list. There's also a custom option down at the bottom of the list where you can just tell it I have a so many cell disc. Okay. Now, if you're running a 5E or a SeedStar 2 planter, you're typically running a ProMax 40 in this section, but we don't even get this option because it's an ExactEmerge planter. The other thing to note too is like when you start thinking about switching from corn to soybeans, you're gonna have to come back here and switch it to soybeans, right? But before you can put your soybean disc in, because your soybean disc is going to be a 64 cell disc, before you can do that, you're going to have to go back to work setup and switch your crop. So switch your crop to soybeans first, and then come back in here and get that soybean disc dialed in for the soybean pass or the soybean planting. Also inside this setup menu, we have the opportunity to tweak some alarms. So all of our alarms that we hear for high or low population, singulation, seed spacing, those can all be, these are defaults from the factory. If you want it more or less sensitive, you sure can adjust these numbers. Same thing goes with like downforce and ride quality. So on our gauge wheels, we have those sensors on every row. So this is where we can establish a target margin, which we'll talk a lot more about target margin and downforce in 2 weeks when we get together. And but these are the high and low alarms for that system, as well as what you want for a buzzer as far as poor ride quality, poor ground contact. I think Deere recommends no less than 97% ground contact, and ride quality 90% or 95, I think. I don't got a default in there. That might be a glitch with my simulator. So that kind of wraps up setup and choosing the seed disc and making sure that's accurate. There's a couple calibrations that we need to do every season to kind of check out our system too. So through this diagnostics and calibrations button, we're going to navigate to the calibration section. And we're going to talk about our height sensor and our gauge wheel downforce sensor. So we'll start with the height sensor here. And the good thing about onboard calibrations is Deere's been really good about giving us instructions. It'll look just like this. They will walk us through the process. So we'll hit begin calibration. And we calibrate a height sensor. You need to have your planter unfolded and tractor, everything running, because we're going to raise and lower our planter. So I'm going to grab my controls over here and I'm going to raise my planter fully and then hit the next button. And then it asked me to fully lower my planter. So I will go ahead and operate my controls to lower my planter. Oh, just like the real thing. Don't have my EPG on. It thinks I want to plant. And then you get through that and hit next, it will tell us whether it's successful or unsuccessful. So the reason we do calibrations, it's a easy system check, right? So if it's unsuccessful, we got a height sensor that's bent, height sensor that's broken, connection that's bad, wire, you know, any of the above. So we'd have to get out and take a look at that. This is the potentiometer type sensor you see on your planter frame. This is not the push button type sensors that you see for like the CCS things. There's two sensors on your planter for height. And then the other piece that we look at too is height settings for like a start and a stop height for the motors. We'll hit edit settings here. And my rule of thumb over the years, and I don't think it really changes with exact emerges, is we want to ramp up or start the system when the row units are starting to brush the ground. So typically what I'll do is sitting in the yard after we've calibrated up and down, I'll go ahead and lower my planter just so the opener blades are kind of brushing the ground there. And then I'll hit that set, and that will set to current position. And so what that does in turn is when I'm planting and I hit the lower button, right? When it starts, say it sets to 40%. At 40%, it's going to start kicking in that system to plant. In the same way, it won't kick it out till 40%, you know, to that position if you're raising the planter. So if you need to cheat through a little mud, it shouldn't kick off, those sort of things. And we'll say okay, and okay again. And that kind of completes. So really important with calibrations, we say okay and save. Otherwise, yeah, doesn't save, but it does timestamp it for us when it's done. The next one is gauge wheel downforce. We'll jump into there, and it's nice and quick and easy. It's all we got to do here is raise the planter. So once again, you got everything unfolded. We're going to raise the planter. So let's move my SCVs back to the raised position. Give it a second to recognize that. Can't be moving either, right? Wheel speed must be 0, planter must be raised. We'll hit next. And then we're hit next again. So this is actually hitting the 0 button. We're going to 0 the sensors. Calibration successful. So what you're doing here is you got a load sensor on every row. And we want to make sure when it's raised and at this point, you know, the gauge wheels, it's on the gauge wheel stop is where the load sensor is. So when we lower the planter, that sensor is measuring force, right? That the gauge wheels are, you know, when it hits the stop. And, you know, that's what's measuring our downforce. With it in the raised position, it should be no pressure on it at all. It should be truly zeroed. And if there's anything that's hanging up, sticking, whatever, and we go to 0 that, and the system sees a problem, it will give us a message here and it'll let us know, hey, maybe we need to go check on, you know, row number 7. So that's why, once again, we take a look at these things before season. Okay, so that was our calibrations. I'm just going to pop back down and catch my spot. Okay, next place we want to go is outside of these diagnostics and calibrations. These are the two that we needed to do here. And I'm going to show you some advanced settings. So inside a couple of our apps on the Gen 4 display, there's a lot inside advanced settings. One of them would be the SeedStar app. And we'll learn later that in the guidance app, there's a lot of advanced settings as well. This little button, this circle with an arrow and a dot, that's advanced settings. I wish they made it more obvious. But in here, we've got some other things to take a look at and enable. So there's two things that are pretty critical at this time that I want to talk about, and that would be fast start and your speed source. So fast start, we used to call this quick start on SeedStar 2, or we still call it quick start on a SeedStar 2 planner. But fast start, you know, when you put your planner down, you'll have the fast start button kind of, or the drive button light up and everything's energized. And it basically wants you to take off within a 6-second window. If you don't take off within a 6-second window, everything kind of, it doesn't shut off, but it goes away from the ready stage, I guess. So by hitting the fast start button, and I have a hotkey in my shortcut bar that basically re-energizes it. So the scenario might be you're backing into the corner, you get the planner down, you're about ready to go, and then you decide, oh, I need to go out and check something, or your phone rings, right? So a couple minutes go by, now you're kind of getting refocused, you're going to start, then you can hit your fast start button, that energizes it, and you can take off. And the reason you want, I mean, it'll plant whether you push it or not, but this helps minimize that skip from a dead stop. And of course, an electric drive planner, because its reaction time is very quick, it does reduce it quite a bit as well. So fast start, quick start on a SeedStar 2. And then speed source, always want to make sure that this is working and that we have a valid speed source. So not a bad idea in the yard, just to make sure once we get through these things, if we drop our planner down and, you know, drag it through the yard or run, we don't get any buzzers about speed source, right? So once set to auto, with it being set to auto, it's going to look, there's two types of speed source, either radar or GPS that we want to use. So it's going to look at which one's on the system. Most of us these days are using GPS. If not, there is an option to go to wheel speed, but this is not as accurate. You'll get notices about using wheel speed if that's what you are using, and you need to get a GPS source into your system or that radar into the system. So just be aware of where that's at as well. These are the things that make a planter plant. It has to know if it's up or down. Speed source has to be accurate. Has to know what kind of seed disc, what crop is planting, how many cells are on those discs. Those are all kind of part of the equation, so it knows how fast to turn the meter. Okay, well, that kind of wraps up the setup on the planner side of things. I'm going to jump over into section control quick, and then we're going to talk a little bit about TCM calibration. So we'll hop out of the SeedStar app, and we're going to move over and talk about section control. So I did customize my shortcut bar down here. I do have a section control master on off on here, and I have the fast start button on here right now, and of course my SeedStar. So this is a quick on off, which you would want this, if you're planting and you stop in the middle of the field, another scenario here, and you decide, something malfunctions, right? And we got to back up, patch that back in, and you just want to turn off that section control. You want to make sure it doesn't look at any coverage. You just want to make sure it's patched in, no skips. So that's why I would use that on this screen. To set it up, we'll need to go to menu, applications, and then hop on over to section control. So in general, machine settings are going to be like your planter stuff, and then all your AMS applications reside under the application tab. And there we go, right in front of my face. All right, once again, you got your master on off. And then a new feature, or a nice feature to Gen 4s, is the option to use or not use your boundaries. So our setup files, when we bring them in from the App Center, they contain farm and field names, AB lines, flags, and boundaries. If you bring boundaries over and you got like a rogue one in there, it's not right, you can just turn it off and not use it. So that's always a good thing. The other thing you can do, I guess the other thing is, if you got a good boundary, let's use them, make sure they're enabled. It'll see them and try to turn them on for you. Because, if you're going to make a boundary, we prefer that they are done with RTK and driven versus, done in the computer, and for the best results. But with a good boundary in this scenario, if you hang your planter out the outside of that boundary and you really shouldn't be planting there, it'll kick that section out. Probably more important with sensitive crops these days and chemicals on your sprayer pass, that you have a good accurate boundary in there and use those. We'll talk quickly about overlap settings and performance tuning. So master on, the operation is corn, so it's checked. If we hit the overlap settings, got 3 types of overlap settings to look at. First one is seed placement. It used to be called coverage. Then we have exterior boundary and interior boundary. In the beginning, we used to set these all up at 100% because we just wanted no risk for any sort of skip. Systems have been tuned in really nice, and you can still, so you can have opportunities now to tweak these and put any level of overlap in there. And when we say 50% overlap, what it's saying is if you've got 2 rows that make up a section, when half of that section gets through the boundary or through the previous coverage, then it's going to trigger the on or the off. Okay. If you have it set to 100%, that means both of those rows in a section have to get through that coverage before it triggers it off. We're back on. Okay, so if you want to tweak that, maybe you want to go to 75%. You sure can. It defaults to plant to the row, but you can actually now in the new systems set this up to create an intentional overlap or an intentional skip. I don't see a lot of intentional overlaps, but I do have some customers I've worked with in the past that like to create an intentional skip, especially in the headland, right? So when they're coming back to harvest or thinking about their combine pass and, it gets tight, on that last row for the rest of the the last headland row. So they'll put an intentional skip in there so they can get their corn head down that last row there. So I'm gonna leave it on plant to row and just say, okay, I'm just wanted to work kind of the traditional way and hit save. And then lastly, performance tuning. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because this is an in-field adjustment, and we're going to talk about that in 2 weeks when we get together. But this is, I guess, to note is, remember we talked about delays under the implement profile? We're not going to change our delays. We're going to basically use this little worksheet to tune in our planters, tell it what we're doing. Are we going into the planted area, so into the headland, or are we exiting it? And what, how much of a skip or overlap did we observe? How fast were we driving when we did it? So that wraps up section control. I'll X out of that. And one more final display thing, definitely not the least. Probably one of the first things we should think about doing is getting our TCM calibrated. So you saw me click on the ISO VT button on my shortcut bar. The receiver doesn't have its own button like it used to in the 2630. This is how we get there. It's on the ISO VT. If you have other controllers on the CAN bus, you might have to go to this menu and choose the receiver because you might have a rate controller or something in here too. So just be aware of that to find it. And then of course, the first screen we see on the receiver here is the info screen. We're going to navigate, and it tells us what, I guess also for preseason checks, don't forget if you're still using, if it still says 3DSF1, right, and you need to buy a sub, make sure you get a hold of your sales rep at the location that you work with so we can get that subscription entered in there under the activation tab. So I don't want to overlook that. And then also on the setup tab, we want to navigate over here to the TCM calibration area. We want it on. If it's not on, it won't auto track. And then we want to go ahead and hit the cal button. And TCM cals, not a lot of changes here, but if we want to park our vehicle on a flat and level surface, understand where that fixed axle, that non-steering axle is again. So same rules apply as with the measurements. And we're going to, essentially, you're going to face, I'm going to use the example, you're going to face north. You're going to hit the enter button. It's going to calibrate itself for level facing the one direction. So it's just kind of setting up the receiver to understand how it sits on the machine. And then we're going to ask you to turn the vehicle around. And so sometimes it's just better to do before you hook up the planner, honestly. But get the turned around and facing the exact opposite direction. So south in this example, and your non-steering axle will need to be in the same spot. So it's not going to be in the exact same footprint, but the axle needs to be in the exact same footprint it was in before. You'll say, okay, that will calibrate. And you are successful. Make sure you hit enter to save. Well,
one other comment, Margot. For those of you running 3000 and 6000 series receivers, just a reminder, there is a required software update that needs to be done prior to running this year. You can either go to stellarsupport.com and download that yourself or take it to one of our stores and we'll do it for a small fee. But one thing we've noticed is after you do that software update, the first time you power up the receiver outside, it will take longer than average to start warming up and tracking signals, sometimes between 20 and 30 minutes.
Okay, well, I'm gonna switch over to my iPad here.
Yeah.
And you want to talk a little bit about what we're going to review here next, Chris?
Yeah, well, Margot's switching over. What she's going to be covering now is an app on the Apple App Store, and it's also available on Google Play called Equipment Plus. Previously, John Deere had an app for each individual machine type, so they had Planter Plus, Baler Plus, and now they're merging them all into one app that is really a good crib notes version of the operator's manual. It doesn't replace the operator's manual, but as Margot is going to demonstrate, it does a really good job of showing you the key functions of what you need to look for on your planter.
Okay, could everybody see the Planter Plus app? Can you confirm that,
Yep,
Chris?
absolutely. Yep.
Perfect. All right, so I've got a couple planters configured in here. So the beauty of the app is kind of you get to create your piece of equipment that you have sitting in your yard, and it will tailor the information that you see to your planter. So I'll just show you how that works here quick. Once you sign into the app, you hit the plus sign. As Chris mentioned, it's for multiple products. We're going to want to navigate to a planter here, but we do have sprayer and tillage functions as well. And then you get to pick out the model of your planter. Maybe you run a 1795, 24 row 20, 5E, no fertilizer. You get the idea. You can kind of configure it all out and spec out your machine. So maybe we just have screw adjust row cleaners, a 6000. It's using 4. We have markers, section control, 2-point. Use tractor generation. We have IRHD, normal closing wheels. Then it'll give you a summary here of all the functions. And of course, you can reset that and rebuild it if you missed something, or you can save that configuration. So then when you come back into the app, your planter will be there waiting for you. So I actually built out, so now I have 3 planters in my app. I built out one for the planter that was in our simulator here. I kind of lied. The one in the simulator was 16 rows, but this is more configured like the one in the simulator. But to kind of give you the flow of how this works and how I would use it pre-season is you've got some checklists, which these checklists are a little like the outside inside the cab checklist. These are pretty similar to what we reviewed today. And then, or has some of the things that we reviewed today in them. And then if you navigate to the planter section, it'll have a lot of things to walk around the planter with physically. The SeedStar section gets you into the monitor side of things, kind of a checklist on what to do when you're changing crop, maintenance features. It really does dive in there. I'm going to just, for the sake of time, dive into the planter section. And as we're talking about pre-season readiness, I would use this and I would walk around my planter. We have, it starts right in with the meters. So I told it, this is the 1775. So this is an exact emerge planter. So it's going to show me how to clean out effectively if I haven't done that. Hopefully we did that last year. But anyway, you can dial in and say, hey, I'm getting ready to plant corn. And it'll give us some recommendations on which seed bowl you need to have. So the 32 cell, what kind of double eliminator you have, agitation strip, what kind of brush belt, so part numbers, right? If you need to replace something, then of course it gives you a vacuum range for seed sizes. So that's nice. Then I can just keep swiping and I get a visual inspection of the meter and what I need to be looking at on my meter. This is the 3-time double eliminator. We recommend it set in that middle notch there. That is our standard position. It'll accommodate 90% of our seed sizes. And then there is an agitation strip that needs to be, so I'll back up. This needs to be pulled out of the way when we go to soybeans, okay? And then agitation strip here. This is a green one with these little bumps on it. That one's used in corn. There's a yellow one that we install for soybeans. So just be aware of that. And this app will walk you right through that. And then this is a visual of the 32 cell seed bowl that we use. And of course, one thing with meters has always been meter hub tension or hub height. And it'll kind of walk through disengaging it from the drive motor and turning it over by hand, try to understand how much contact it has. I will say these tension a little tighter than we did with the, the flat, like Pro Max 40 discs before. And of course, it kind of walks us through the instructions of how to pull off that disc and pull the pin for the hub and turn that to tighten it up. So does not replace the OM. If you need more details, this is operator's manual stuff. This is stuff we find in the operator's manual for hub. And then lastly, knocker wheels installed. Make sure they're not, they're in good condition, not nubbed over and flat, and seals are nice and clean and good condition as well. So little meter maintenance for us. If I move over to the soil engaging system, it's going to talk about drop and gauge wheels and maybe measuring your opening blades. Okay, of course, the no-go is 14. A lot of us at our John Deere shops will say 14 and a half, because what happens if they start wearing down midway through the season and we lose that true V. So, and then of course, nothing changes here, right? The old business card trick, looking for 1.5 to 2.5 inches of pinch point on those opener blades. And we can add shims in there to create or remove shims to create that pinch point. So walks us kind of through those things, gives us nice visuals. Seed delivery system. So ExactEmerge, some of us are learning about the brush belt delivery system. It's all new to us. This gives us a good visual of how we tip up that, I call it the hood, but the hood in front of the meter housing there, remove the meter housing, take up the hood, and then you can pull out that brush belt cartridge. And once you pull out the brush belt cartridge, you can go ahead and you're going to need to disconnect the harness from the seed sensor that's part of that cartridge. Get it all the way out of there, and then you can lay it out on the bench. You detension, there's a little wheel where you can detension, turn it counterclockwise to detention, and then you can open it up with the tabs on the side, and you can open that up and get that brush belt out of there. So didn't talk about purging and filling these brush belts, but we'll talk about that next time. And these should be purged and cleaned, at the end of the season. So it kind of walks us through some of that. And just inspect that brush, make sure it's in good condition. If there's any visible grooves anywhere. Sensor, I want to make sure that lens on the sensor, and that is replaceable, just the lens. So the sensor is spendy, right? So if you have some damage there, you can replace that as well. So kind of walks through some of those situations as well. Regarding planting depth, they're going to recommend we start with downforce at 100 pounds, and then of course use our so when you're setting your T handles, the same rules kind of apply there. Always want to field check your depth. Don't assume that it worked here last year. Changes in tillage practices, changes in how it freezed and thawed, or how much snow we got, how things work up, changes how planters react and with depth. So, but if you are making it, once you get that set, if you need to go a little bit more, each little notch is a 1/4 inch. Just keep that in mind. Of course, it walks us through validating depth and what we need to do to adjust for it. Row cleaner height. So in the yard, you're going to probably eyeball this based off of where it was last year. And then of course, if you have easy adjust row cleaners, you're going to be able to adjust those from the cab. Otherwise, if you've got screw adjust, you're going to get your impact out with your extension and get those where they need to be kind of going when you get to the field. One thing to look at with closing wheels, we talk about this quite a bit, and is making sure they're centered on the row. So you can do this in the yard. Drop that planter down, take a look at how that closing wheel will tracks behind the opener, and if it's actually closing in the center, right above the trench. If it is not, got to answer the question: are they centered? No. That's where we got to open up or loosen up that hardware, and sometimes those things start to get wallowed out and all the above, right? But loosen and recenter it, readjust it, and tighten it back up. and it does have us, gives us some specs here, 105 foot-pounds. That's where they want those tightened back up to. So just a really nice app. We're going to dive into this deeper next time because it does help us set the machine in the field. I'll point out frame leveling quick. Nothing's changed here. When we get our hitch in position and we lower the planter, we should be 20 to 22 inches off the ground. That's been the same for quite some time. Also down here, little vacuum cheater. This is cool. Come in here. I've got 1,700 seeds, or I got 2,100 seeds per pound. You need 17 inches of vacuum. So CCS pressure charts, 24 row here, small corn. We usually start in that 12 to 14 or so on our gauges for CCS. So just little reminders. A lot of this stuff is in our kibble guides too. So kind of depends. If you like that paper, we got the books. If you like the app is super, super nice as well. Well, I think we're right at an hour, so I'm going to wrap it up. Chris, do you have anything else to add?
No, thank you very much, Margot. I do have a few closing comments here. First, I just did put a poll in the chat. This is the first time I've ever done a poll, so hopefully it works. I'm just asking if you'd like to see a version of this clinic done with 2630 and SeedStar 2 or XP SeedStar planners in mind. So if that's something you're interested in, please go ahead and vote. And then just a few final comments and announcements I'd like to share. First, Margot did a great job covering all that information, and we have a follow-up session in a couple weeks to go for more in the field. But if this is intimidating to you and you'd like our help, feel free to reach out to your local service department at Kibble Equipment, and we have a version of a program called Ready to Run, which is exactly what Margot went through, but on your farm. Couple other announcements. We do have a new tool called Kibble Access. I'm on our website right now. And on the banner, there's a banner called Sign Up for Kibble Access and Enter to Win a John Deere Gun Safe. So what Kibble Access is, if you click this, it's basically a way to access your account online. It gives you the ability to order parts, set up a virtual parts bin to restock parts quickly, and a really neat feature, download all of your invoices on your own. So if you need invoices for tax time coming up, sign up here and you can get all that yourself. So if you sign up in March, you'll be entered in to win a John Deere Gun Safe, which, being a John Deere Gun Safe owner, I highly recommend. Other couple promotions. Reminder that we have our some part specials going on. If you click on specials on the website, you can see what we have going on currently, the filter sale. And we continue to run our 2G to 3G to 4G MTG upgrades, so you can do a lot of the things that Margot covered, getting your setup files sent wirelessly to the display without those USB sticks. Thank you for your time. We're going to be back here in about 2 weeks to go through in the field setup. Thank you, Margot. You did a great job. And please make comments in the comment section for future topics. And this will be available on Facebook, and we will also upload it to YouTube. Thanks, everybody, and be safe.